Barack Obama insists negative attacks on his character are distracting Americans from the real issues. John McCain says he'll keep addressing Barack Obama's relationship with the former radical Bill Ayers because it is a question of judgment.
We are facing the greatest financial crisis of our lifetime. It is affecting every home, every owner, every small business owner, every employee, every worker, every family. Failure is not an option.
Future generations, they'll judge us by how we responded to this test. Will they say this was a time when America lost its way? When we lost our purpose, we lost our nerve? When we allowed our petty differences and our broken politics and the nastiness that's come to pass for campaigns to plunge this country into a dark and painful recession?
So let's talk about this with NBC political director Chuck Todd for today's First Read on Politics. Good morning, Chuck. So let me ask you, with your assessment and your team, are these candidates doing enough to address this crisis? Barack Obama said future generations will judge, but folks today who will be voting in November are trying to judge as well right now.
Well, it's hard to see if they really are doing enough to address it or not. I mean, in some ways, voters aren't paying attention to what they're saying about the economy at this point. They're expecting to hear more. I mean, to me, it's been stunning that the three debates that we've had so far, two presidentials and one vice presidential, have had no shelf life, meaning that the way they've debated the economy at all three has not sort of somehow transformed any debate about the economy now or what's happening in Washington. I mean, there almost is a disconnect between the crisis and between how each of these gentlemen is trying to show how they would deal with it. Obama is simply riding the wave a little bit because it does seem to be a voter default position for the Democrats, whether it's for president, Senate, or House. While McCain is trying a few things, he unveiled a plan at the last debate, but it's, wasn't well received on the right, and the Obama campaign is beating it up on the left. So I don't know what voter expectations are at this point. I'm sure they feel like they're not doing enough, but I think voters feel like nobody's doing enough. Right.
That's interesting. Well, John McCain is, and as I mentioned at the top, keeping its focus on Obama's relationship with Bill Ayers, a relationship that Barack Obama addressed in a new radio interview with Michael Smerconish. Chuck, I want to play that and talk to you about it.
Okay.
The gentleman in question, Bill Ayers, is a college professor, teaches education at the University of Illinois. And that's how I met him, was working on a school reform project that was funded by an ambassador and former close friend of Ronald Reagan's. And I was sitting on this board with a whole bunch of conservative businessmen and civic leaders, and he was one of the people who was on this board. And he lives in the same neighborhood. Ultimately, I ended up learning about the fact that he had engaged in this reprehensible act 40 years ago. But I was 8 years old at the time, and I assumed that he had been rehabilitated.
So, Chuck, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that top McCain officials, campaign officials, are conflicted on how far to go with these negative attacks.
Right.
Let me ask you, we have talked about negative attacks working in some cases and then they can backfire, but what indications out there are there, if any, that show that this is working beyond the base for Senator McCain?
Well, we don't have any indications yet that we've seen that. I think at this point they are a sort of a split personality. On one hand, it says, hey, when things aren't going well and the environment's against you, you got to go negative, you got to go character. And maybe this is a way to catch up. Maybe this is a way to close the gap in Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania, in states where there are some older voters who are, have never been sold yet on the idea of Obama. On the other hand, you do risk looking out of touch. But can it get worse for McCain? And I think that's the other thing they look at, is that they probably can't. So they might as well try this, because they don't want to ever say they didn't. At the same time, also try to come up and start a new debate on the economy, which is what they attempted to do as well. I think they're hoping to try to do both. If they just stick with negative, it might be a way to catch up. But I think even they acknowledge they don't know how they get across the finish line with it.
Interesting. Well, Chuck, speaking of interesting things, Joe Biden had something to say about the Ayers controversy. Talk about tough talk. Listen to what he had to say.
All these things they said about Barack Obama in the rallies and in TV debate, on TV before the debates, and all the things they're saying after the debate. John McCain, if you notice, couldn't bring himself to look Barack Obama in the eye and say these things. Well, folks, in my neighborhood, and when I say something about me, look me in the eye and tell me. Say it to me. Straight up. Say it to me head on.
So, Chuck, some people say that this sounds like a setup for the next debate, that Biden
Sure
is kind of
does.
daring McCain, come on over, and then we'll let the voters slap you back down because they won't like this kind of talk, especially with what we're seeing on Wall Street.
Right. No, I mean, it is absolutely feels like a bait that Biden is baiting McCain on this one. And I'm sure at this point it will come up. I think the moderator may feel no choice but to bring it. When you put it in TV ads, and that's what McCain has done today, the RNC with Ayers, I think it's likely to come up. But it is sort of a baiting, and it does present McCain with it's a tricky deal to do. You're going to have 70 million people watching. It's one thing to do it under the radar in TV ads and at rallies, where it can seep into the system. It's another thing to do it in front of 70 million people, particularly what if it happens on a day like last Tuesday, where the Dow drops another 500 points, and you feel like, can you really talk about Bill Ayers on a day when everybody is afraid to look at their 401k reports? And by the way, it's usually in the middle of the month, October 15th, that people start getting their statements on 401ks and retirement accounts for the third quarter. Oh, man. I mean, that could be you could have a very jittery audience on the economy, and do you want to talk about Ayers? That's the dilemma they have.
All right, Chuck, good to talk to you today. Thank you so much, and make sure to check out First Read First Thing every morning. Just log on to firstread.msnbc.com for the best news and analysis from the NBC political team.